The company is Aspect IP, the IP for intellectual property. Aspect Intellectual Property. On my right is Courtney Lambert, on my left Tom Hochstetter, and on my left as well is Sloan Foster. Let's start with Courtney Lambert. Courtney, talk to us a little bit about your background and the inspiration for Aspect IP.
Sure. So my background is I led the intellectual property commercialization organization for AT&T and SBC. I've done over $500 million in intellectual property licenses during my career, and I realized pretty quickly that there's one form of commercialization with corporate and enterprise intellectual property that there aren't a lot of players out there commercializing or taking advantage of, and that is the method and ability to create living, breathing entities out of assets, intellectual property assets that these companies own, and they might consider them dormant, but there's a lot of value in those companies.
Courtney, let's talk a little bit about the team. What makes your team unique and qualified to conduct business as Aspect IP?
The biggest challenge we have with commercializing intellectual property in the method that we do, and that is creating those standalone entities, is finding a team that has the skill set and has done it before. Do we have the skill set to launch individual standalone companies? Do we have the skill set to understand how to mine and harvest intellectual properties within the large enterprise companies? So two of the co-founders are here today, Tom and Sloan. Both of them maintain a skill set that's unparalleled in the industry with respect to finding assets and launching startup businesses.
You mentioned Tom and Sloan. Let's meet them right now, starting with Sloan. Sloan Foster, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I'm Chief Marketing Officer of Aspect Intellectual Property. My history is both launching products and companies in numerous markets in San Antonio and Austin.
Next is Tom Hochstetter. Tom, your background.
I have about 25 years in enterprise software development. Most recently, I've been the president of Fluid Innovation, an intellectual property licensing firm out of Austin. Most of my software experience comes from some of the major software development shops, Microsoft, IBM. I spent a number of years at Yahoo in their search business development organization doing M&A and intellectual property commercialization.
Let's talk about how Aspect IP will work practically. I mean, once you're up and running, and you're already up and running, how do you acquire these intellectual properties, and then what happens after you acquire them?
So a great question. What happens with Aspect is we contract with asset owners. They could be large Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 1000s, or a small development shop or product or technology company that has a latent piece of intellectual property that they'd like to commercialize and move out of their organization. So our first step is to mine that asset out and find the best assets that fit our particular criteria. It's what we call running start assets that they have. Technology that may have existing customers, they may have existing revenues, they may have proven business models already in place, but they're lying dormant or latent within that corporation, and there's no interest in that corporation in actually taking that product to market.
And we're talking about corporations that in many cases are major American corporations that we've all heard of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So our first set of targets will be Fortune 500 companies, and one of the reasons, as you heard from the team, we have expertise and experience within those companies, the IBMs, the Microsofts, Boeing. I've also spent a couple of years there. Lockheed Martin, AT&T, as you heard from Courtney, is one of his past experiences. We'll spend more time there because they have a deeper, richer pool of assets, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other assets at smaller companies that are just as valuable, just about ready for commercialization, and can provide real value and a catalyst for Aspect IP.
So Courtney, where do you see the company in 1 year?
Oh, it's a great question. In our first 18 months of service, we will have launched 5 to 6 standalone entities that'll create approximately 50 to 60 jobs. Those companies will be living, breathing entities. We will provide services from a centralized standpoint, whether they be HR services, marketing services to those companies, until they reach a threshold that they can bring them onto their own platform more efficiently. We're the catalyst for getting them in business. It'll be a fast-paced first year for us, and it gives our investors an option to gain a little piece of ownership in 5 to 6 startups with the investment and core aspect.
Sloan, Courtney talked about these companies that you will launch. Talk to me a little bit about these companies. What will they be?
Well, there'll be a myriad of areas, but our first two that we'll be launching is in environmental services and is in e-commerce. Our environmental services solution is a platform that allows companies to manage regulatory compliance across multiple cities and states and across multiple locations. So it's very scalable. It comes with revenue and it comes with a support team as well. So we'll be launching that as our first solution, looking for other areas to take that into, oil and gas, real estate, other areas where we can apply that same technology solution. The second one is an e-commerce solution that allows us to more efficiently solve e-commerce platform problems for a lot less expensive than currently exist in the marketplace today. It's a modular-based solution and it allows you to pick and choose as you grow from a company perspective. So we're really excited. As I mentioned, both come with revenue, both come with support teams, and with customers most importantly.
Tom, you worked at Yahoo. You've seen startups for decades now. What is unique about the model for Aspect IP as far as having these startups begin with a lot of traction?
I think what's most important about the types of assets we're targeting right now is they come with what we call a running start. You have a customer or two or more. You have revenue. You have proven technology or soon to be proven technology in a beta or alpha phase where customers are using it, giving you good feedback. You may have a support team that goes with that asset. And when you look at traditional startups, they start with passionate entrepreneurs with a PowerPoint and a dream, and that's where they start, and they need capital to get running. In the Aspect model, those assets are in fact up and running, ready to go. What they need is a seasoned management team to come in and activate or accelerate their development to, as Sloan mentioned previously, to take those assets from their current instantiation and find other markets for them so we can expand the revenue and customer base.
Courtney, Tom talked about the Aspect IP companies hitting the ground running. Help me to better understand that.
Great. So Tom talked about how we find proven technologies and how we push them a little bit faster to help them grow. This is a good chart to show a good example for that. From left to right horizontally are the different life cycles of a startup business. The orange line on the chart represents the typical maturation of a startup company. We live on the green portion of that orange line. We're investing in companies once they've already passed through the idea phase and they're ready for the intro to market phase, or in many cases have already been intro to market in the form of beta, like Tom mentioned earlier. What that does for us is it allows us to minimize our money that is dumped into research and development, and we maximize the return that's already been spent from an AT&T or a large company when they've invested in R&D on that company. Once we've introduced the company to the market or the products to the market, we're already up and rolling and have an opportunity to do what I call exit options. We've shown a growth rate of these companies, we've gained market share, and we're able to go gain our second round of funding or go offer exit options to venture capitalists who want to double down or invest in companies that have proven track records. So, for example, when we launch a company with a positive revenue stream, within 18 months, we expect to already have been in negotiations for second round funding or exit options for those companies.
Tom, we've talked about how Aspect IP will find and identify these companies. Let's talk about the mechanics of how you will launch them. Phase 2, once you identify these companies, how do we get them going?
So that's a great question. So we talk about mining the assets. One of the other areas of expertise we'll bring to the conversation is mining superior talent, right? We'll find assets where we don't have specific domain expertise in, and we'll be in market finding a senior manager or senior management team that can then take the asset after we've activated and accelerated it into market, then it can take it forward in a positive fashion. What's important to note from an investor standpoint is Aspect will never lose control. We'll offset the operational day-to-day activities to the management team, but Aspect will maintain board control until some liquidity event. What we think would be a brilliant outcome during that liquidity event or that equity event is for that core management team that we bring in to actually be the buyers of the asset and take it away from Aspect and own that company outright and be independent.
So Sloan, we've talked about how Aspect IP will identify and acquire these companies and launch these companies. What will be the secret sauce for success once they're launched?
Our success is dependent on customers and revenue, and as I mentioned, our first two assets we'll be launching have both customers and revenue. So my job is to grow both of those entities, going in and maintaining and growing existing customer base, as well as obtaining new customers through lead generation and new market entry, finding new ways to take this technology into new areas.
So Courtney, we're talking to investors, and of course every investor would love to be in on the next Facebook. But at Aspect IP, you're not necessarily going after the next Facebook.
No, we're taking advantage of untapped intellectual property assets that are existed to the tunes of millions of them within Fortune 500 companies. The analogy I like to use is the road's littered with thousands of nickels, dimes, and quarters, and it's the people that are stepping on top of those, reaching for the next dollar bills, that aren't taking advantage of what's right under their feet.
For more information on Aspect intellectual property, contact the law office of James Montgomery.